Hello, and welcome to the Argyle AI Decision Makers Summit, Shaping the Future of Business. My name is Nick with Argyle, and it's great to have everyone joining us today. A couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker. First, a quick reminder to stop by our sponsors' virtual booths at any time during today's event and for the following week. Our partners are committed to providing you with valuable content and a great overall experience. At any time during today's event, you can visit their virtual booths from the main agenda page, which include complimentary materials, information, and meet and greet opportunities. Throughout today's event, you will also have the opportunity to win one of several prizes. So be sure to check out the prizes and raffle rules tab of the interface to see how you can earn points. To ask questions throughout the session, simply type into the Q&A chat and we will address your questions at the end of the session. Now, without further delay, I would like to introduce our speaker, Bharath Nagaraj, Senior Principal FTT, Cohesity. We're super excited to have Bharath with us for a thought leadership presentation titled Unleashing Generative AI, Transforming Enterprise Data Discovery and Decision Making. Welcome, Bharath. Over to you.
Thanks, Nick. You can hear me clearly, right?
Yep.
Awesome. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm very excited to talk about this particular topic because this has been near and dear to me for the past 2 years, almost since OpenAI came out. I've been working very closely with our data teams, with our innovation teams, to try and figure out how we can bring value to our customers through GenAI. So I'm going to take you through a journey where we're going to take a focus on the key aspect of generative AI, which is making data available for use cases. The agenda is 4 pieces, and I'm hoping to get through all of this in the next 25 to 30 minutes, and hopefully we have about 5 minutes to kind of look at questions. I'm going to talk about the key challenges with enterprise today. As I've been going through this generative AI journey, not many enterprises have been fast to adopt GenAI, particularly due to the fact that data is a very hard thing to manage because the size it's growing. And two, the security is a very sensitive topic when it comes to when it comes to our security teams and our compliance teams. So how can we actually bring that into a value for GenAI? We're going to take a look at some of the top, how do we address the enterprise challenges? How do we actually move from a point where we have all of these different silos? How can we consolidate it? How can we make it prepped for generative AI? And then we're going to take a look at the architecture itself, as well as use cases around where it makes sense to drive a TCO and ROI for our personas. And ultimately, how can we actually bring the architecture, the solution, as well as the problem statement to where customers can experience limitless value? A little bit of what I do, and this has been my goal for the last 10 years, and it's driven by our CEO Mohit Aaron back in the day, where we wanted to kind of work on data. We wanted to simplify how organizations can secure, how organizations can manage their data, and ultimately unlock limitless value. But the problem statement is that enterprise suffer from this thing called mass data fragmentation. If you're working for any company over the course of the last 25 to 30 years, we've had millions and zillions of applications that have come in creating more data. And the more applications there are, whether it is on premises, if it is in the cloud, you're creating more and more of these silos, the more data that's being created. And what happens, and what has been happening, and this has been exacerbated by cloud, edge, and on-premise, is that you have so many different aspects of where the data resides. It becomes a very complex and almost a non-starter on how to even bring a consolidated solution to all these data sets. Also, it's very unsecure. Nobody knows who's opening where. One can talk about why ransomware attacks have become more and more common because of this particular phenomena where there are so many open points in an organization. And when you have data in this unmanaged distributed fashion, it's unintelligent. You can't actually put any use to it. And finally, you can't have one solution that can drive value when your ecosystem is in this framework. Now, when we look at how the inefficiency look for when we actually take a look at certain use cases, I can summarize this with this sort of a diagram where when we're trying to bring in a thing like ChatGPT into enterprise, it's very hard because your data estates are almost everywhere. It takes time to aggregate the data. Whether you're looking to solve a solution for legal search, or whether you're trying to solve a solution for enterprise search, um, or healthcare, the ability for you to kind of aggregate data becomes your most expensive starting point. And then you have to start to simplify the way you can search through data, right? You use probably some sort of a regular expression type applications and things that simplify the way you can search for data. The next thing is you want to make sure that you can have relevant users that have access to the right window of data, which is very, very important. And finally, how do we ensure that the right data has touched the right person? All of these processes take a long, long time. And fundamentally, the thing, the main uh, foundation with growing data is the fact that you have something called as primary data, which is data that is current. You have things like ChatGPT and all of these applications working on top. Almost every application, you take databases, almost everybody work at the primary data area. But data is also the information that's stored 5 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago, 20 minutes ago, 30 minutes ago, for 2 years ago, 5 years ago. And they start to form this large little iceberg below. And it's always been very, very hard to extract value from here because none of us have visibility into what this core data looks like. And if you want to make use of this, it requires this process of moving data from somewhere like Glacier to where your application or your computer resides. And it's just a hard problem to solve, right? Let's take a look at some of the use cases. Right, use case one. Think about a complexity of how legal discovery has been so challenging. You have you see so many you see so many scenarios where litigation costs are skyrocketing, and but you have and bigger the company, bigger the cost around all. I'm just going to pause 1 second. Hold on. Um, Nick, I'm getting some things. Can I continue?
Uh, yes, I'm not sure what that is. Yeah, continue. I'll try to figure out. I think there's a little bit of feedback. I don't think it's coming from me, but let me see what I can do.
Got it.
Yeah, please continue.
Yeah. So coming back to the flow, right? So think about litigation firms or large companies that are going through a legal process. They spend a lot of money on paralegals, a lot of money on getting the right data so they can even look for evidence. That whole process almost costs them about 40 to 50% of the total legal fees. And more often than not, they have more false positives than true positives. You can actually bring the same kind of a problem statement to someone who's a CDO or a CIO of a company, because he's managing that mess of all these multiple silos, data that there's multiple copies of the data, duplications of the data is in different format. How do you really put this to use for your actual business user? And to research, to put this together in a certain programmatic manner, it become the amount of time spent is money lost, and it is costly to bring all of these different silos together, right? This also applies to folks that are in compliance, folks that are trying to look at any improprieties that are happening with mass amount of emails that may be coming, folks that, and you have there is no really check. No, there's no real check for folks that are sharing information from an internal organization and externally. There's no checks and balances to say, well, who is saying the right thing and wrong thing, and are we really compliant? Because data is just grown out of proportion.
Hey, Bharath, we have the results of the polls.
Yeah,
If I can go through that now.
go for it, Nick.
Okay. Yeah, great. So, poll question one: how would you describe your organization's progress in its AI adoption journey? And the first category, exploring, researching AI opportunities, but no initiatives launched yet, is 45%. Evaluating, assessing solutions, and planning, but no active implementation, about 27%.
Mhm.
And then implementing, actively deploying AI for specific tasks, such as data management, 27%.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. And this sort of reinforces the context and where we started, because it is just a, most of us are in that R&D phase. Most of us are either we have a bunch of infosec rules that is not allowing us to deploy a certain solution because it breaks them, or we are in a state where we're trying to research the right data management tool that can solve the this data silo problem and the fragmentation problem, right? And that's where we kind of come in. I think this is what we've been trying to bring to the table, and I wouldn't say it is it is one solution versus the other, but this is what Google did to consumer data. If you think about it, when we bring a concept of centralization, but not really, it's a distributed system when you think about Google, but the ability for you to search data, but also use that in basically a Google Sheets or a Google Apps, or use that for maps, you're starting to pull out certain, exponential value out of a single search query. And the start of it all comes down to how we can create a simple, scalable, secure way to consolidate all information. And we do that through help of Cohesity, where we kind of bring, no matter where your data is, whether it's AWS, whether it's on premise, whether it is in whatever cloud you may be in, whether edge computing, if we can bring the data into one little programmable framework, then we can start to do some interesting things, because we can start to bring compute to the data, which means we can bring applications to where the data is, instead of copying the data from point A to point B. A lot of the projects do not get off the ground because the cost of moving the data is so high, right? The other piece is having a distributed framework, because distributed framework means you have multiple brains working in multiple locations, so you can build a concept of a centralized experience for our customers. Third is you can leverage cloud services, the ability for you to use, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are folks that are building vector databases. There are folks that are building even AI tools that employees go for. So you need to focus your aperture on one thing you can solve for your customer. And finally, you can focus on a robust rollback control, which is going to be very key for your generative AI solution to become a reality, because at the end of the day, we cannot have a chat GPT in your company where everybody gets to see everything. You will be allowed, the way this was going to work is, if the right persona gets access to the right amount of data, and he gets to ask the right questions, and there is no leak of information, right?
Great. And we do have the second poll results, Bharath, if you want me to go through those now.
Go for it, Nick.
Great. So here's the main question. What is your most significant challenge in adopting and leveraging Gen AI applications? And the first category, securing team alignment and buy-in, 14.29%.
Mm-hmm.
Ensuring high quality, reliable data, 42.8%.
Yep.
Managing costs and return on investment, ROI concerns, 28.5%.
Yep.
And identifying and selecting the right AI solution for our specific needs, 14.3%.
Brilliant. Yeah. So it's an awesome timing. Thank you, Nick. I think that's a key area where we are addressing it, because most of you are looking, the quality of results is something that's ambiguous right now, and the ROI or TCO, the ability kind of for you to prove value, so that somebody actually puts a check on the table and says, hey, I want to use this application. That seems to be in ensemble almost 70% of you saying that those are the problem areas, right? Um, Thank you again. So that actually brings, I'm going to continue the storyline over here. And that's the idea. So in this, in this about 30 minutes, what I'm trying to get to is the data has to be prepped right. And you have to optimize so that you can have a viable means to drive that ROI and TCO, right? And so enter an application like Cohesity Gaia. So we've been with Cohesity, we've basically been a data protection and data management solution for the large part of the 10, 15 years. And the beauty about that, being in that role and solving problems for our customers, is that when you do backups for a certain company, you sort of have a time history of almost every copy of the data that you have protected for them, whether it is for having a scenario where you can recover when there is a disaster recovery, a disaster that's in play, or if they get affected by ransomware. But the ability to but what we do, and by our inherent function, is we have all copies of all data, and we know where it is, whether it is in your data center, whether it is in your cloud, whether it's in Glacier, whether it's in your edge computing. We kind of bring that into a searchable interface. And now, with what we've sort of done by bringing, now since the data is in one place, you just have to bring the right application to it. And that's what we did with Cohesity Gaia, where we kind of brought a conversational interface to where the data is. And what we were able to do basically is drive the ability to have you built an assistant that has the ability to look at all of your backups, but extract and bring in the data of relevance to the particular persona that the IT team can manage. Here is where RAG comes into play. So retrieval augmented generation, it is a nomenclature that's kind of thrown out almost like cloud at this point. But what really is it, right? And again, I'll go back to the point that I made earlier, right? We can't have everybody accessing everything in an enterprise. It is a non-starter for any project. So if a user does ask a business question, we should have a framework that says, okay, the user is he belongs to the IT environment. So I am going to only pick the data and the files that are relevant to his persona. Then I'm going to use a large language model to provide the ability for the user to ask a question, but without going out of bounds to what he's not allowed to see. He won't be allowed to see what's there in corporate. He won't be allowed to see what's there in the legal side of things, the compliance side of the house, right? And this kind of creates a very different world, right? So if I actually ask ChatGPT what Gaia is, it will look through data that's there in the World Wide Web, but but it's only looking at data that's been trained, right? But if I have a RAG artificial intelligence framework, I have the ability to update the data source from which the intelligence actually comes. So if I actually give it an updated documentation that says, hey, this is the data this is the white paper that I produced yesterday, and I want the Gen AI to actually give me the answer based on the latest data and not what's old, then you create a scenario where you can actually have a low cost, up to date framework within enterprise where the right person has the access to the right data, right? So, and that's the beauty about what a retrieval augmented generation framework can do, in addition to a consolidated data strategy within an enterprise. And throughout all this, you're optimizing the way you're deploying the systems. So, what are some of the benefits of this, right? So, like, you don't need training an LLM takes a lot of money. That's why only a handful of them have done it till now. But that's going to change over the course of time. But it does cost less to train data when you have RAG. The second thing is the answers will be up to date because you're always updating the information based on documents and files that are most current. You are reducing hallucinations, hence the answers will be more accurate. So one of the main challenges with AI co-pilots everywhere is that there is a certain amount of hallucination. So there always is a deviation from what is 100% accurate. It's just where the technology is today. The way you can make things more and more specific and laser focused is by taking the noise out and putting the documents of relevance in focus, right? So that way the answers are as unbiased as possible, right? And the thing that's very, very important with this is that you have to acknowledge uncertainty when context is missing. If sometimes when you ask a question to any AI tool, what happens is it will always answer to your emotions of what you think you want to hear. But it needs to be based on evidence. It needs to be based on citations provided by the documents that's part of the enterprise. So if there is a scenario where it says it is a good thing for the AI system to say, I do not know because you haven't provided me the right information, which means get me the right files. or you got to change the context of how how you're prompting the system itself. So acknowledging uncertainty becomes a key part of that particular workflow. But that's sort of where we have done, we've provided value to our customers, because by bringing this RAG framework, we've sort of improved decision making speed and accuracy. We've boosted certain abilities for different organizations to tap into data almost as if it is oil and it has a value associated with, either a cost savings angle. I had a customer that's like, hey, I'm spending 30,000 or $40,000 per month in Amazon, but I have all these employees that are hoarding documentation over there. Can your system help? And we could just take and provide a visual representation of what those files are, immediately saying, hey, I don't need to keep this in high performance storage. I can put this somewhere else where it's costs less, and immediately I have a TCO angle there. I'll talk about the use cases in just a bit, but there is we are simplifying a lot of the challenges that we're seeing in enterprise. That is, we're consolidating data. We have a framework where we can create a structured role-based control, and then you're creating swim lanes so that the right person is always having access to the right data. And RAG on top of this allows a much more viable deployment, as well as reduces hallucinations and errors. Okay. Um, I'll kind of go through the use cases again, right? So the where we started with was, the traditional world, and I think we still live in that world because enterprises take a long time to adopt to any new technologies for good reason. Is you're spending, where the ability to kind of aggregate data is a large process. It takes weeks to months, and it costs time. And what we are saying is, say if you bring the way you can tap into more value from your data is by using a system like your backup software that already has the history information of all of your company, where consolidation is inherent to the entire function. So all you have to do is bring the right Gen AI application on top of it, like how we built Gaia. So bringing that into forum, right? So what we have been able to do, and there are many examples of this that stretch from that are within the Fortune 500 scope, that have gained value from a solution like Gaia, because we've simplified that whole complex network. We were able to bring contextual understanding to a problem like legal discovery. You do not need to spend on millions and millions of dollars on a room full or a building full of paralegals, where an artificial intelligence system can actually help go through large document sets in a much more efficient manner. You're fixing the speed and accuracy issue, and then you're also reducing costs for the entire project itself, right? So bringing technology where it matters. Second, you look at a scenario where we're looking at knowledge research, and this is a big problem when we look at enterprises. You have so many people sort of like fluidly moving from one job to another, so expertise is left unused, untapped, and there's lead time before somebody becomes useful. But the way, and yeah, it's a casual ideation when you say, hey, you can build these data bots of people, but but it needs to be, to make this more real. What if you had all of the history of all of the work that they did? All you had to do was create basically a swim lane with retrieval augmented generation, so someone like a CDO or CIO can immediately get the new person up and running, because they can speak to an internal company system that has the history and documentation of what somebody previously had done. So again, this allows a better contextual understanding of the problem at hand. It aligns operations. It creates a faster decision-making path for folks. And ultimately, it points to those two things. You're improving quality. You are also improving you're improving your return on investment on the technology itself. The third one is around investigative research, and this is where compliance teams, we've worked with so many compliance teams where they deal with more false positives than true positives when it comes to finding compliance holes in an enterprise. You can look back to almost every case, like you can take a look at the Enron case or the Deepwater Horizon case, where if you actually look deeply, the amount of money spent on discovery was so high, But imagine having an AI tool that can simplify that 40-50% cost on discovery, where within minutes you basically have a brain that basically looks at almost every documents possible, provides these contextual swim lanes for folks to at least make better decisions at different stages. And that has a huge value in terms of reduced human error. And then it has the ability for the compliance team to be more proactive for the organization, so they can actually prevent bad things from happening at a lot more faster click. So these are some of the use cases that we have been able to kind of operationalize in the field, and then so many more. I mean, we are going to see many other softwares that are going to be building AI bots and chatbots around this. But I'll stress the fact that if you actually solve the data problem first, if you can create an ideation of centralization using distributed architectures, where you're bringing applications and compute to where the data is versus moving the data to where the compute needs to be, you have a better starting point of building a generative AI solution. While this is a slide that I use for my customers or prospects, I'd like you guys to take a look at this as the ability to, unlock all these different use cases, but by following a few simple frameworks. So I'll just roll it back to the agenda, Nick. I think I have about 10 minutes for questions. But if I summarize this, right, I wanted to address the main challenge, which is the data is fragmented all over the place in enterprise. And if the bigger the company, bigger the problem. Consolidation is a tough problem, but there is a path to consolidation that is on the table. And once you consolidate data, then you can start to look at how you can realistically apply it to generative AI. Then it's about bringing the right generative AI to the table. Retrieval augmented generation helps you in that standpoint. It also allows an application to build context-ready data sets for different personas. And once you kind of do all of those things, then you can create limitless values for whoever comes to the table, because we live in a world today where everybody deals with data, everybody can get value out of data, and then you can build a business case, whether it is for a cost use case or whether that is for an ROI value proposition for your customer. So I'll stop here, and I'll address questions. And I know I have about 8 minutes to kind of take a look at some of the questions here. So Nick, I see 2 questions. I can take a stab at both if that's okay.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks.
Got it. So Mark says, given the amount of unstructured data in lakes and structured data, how can AI be tamed to allow role-based control? How can this be audited? Very good question. It is so we've actually deep dived into this problem quite a lot with Cohesity. It is an evolving problem statement. I think where you start with is if you have because we took about 10 years to build a robust role-based control. One of the main challenges was, if you're consolidating data, that means that you're bringing in all types of applications, from M365 to NAS to unstructured to VMware to, I mean, God knows how many applications we protect. When we kind of put that into one single namespace, then you building a robust role-based control becomes a must-have if you're even looking at any use case like a basic backup application. So we had a good starting point from that standpoint onwards. But I think what we've sort of looked at, the ability for ability to know where the file was created, who created it, what were the NTFS files permissions, what was the role, what was the path down all the different identity providers, and how are we tagging it when we actually vectorize this information. There is a method to the madness. Obviously, I can't get into the details of how that is, but what we are looking at is a source-based RBAC control that prevents a scenario where a CEO's personal note ends up as a part of something that someone else, some employee can query. And at multiple levels, you can create these fences. So I'm happy to provide some more content later. Maybe you can connect to me on LinkedIn. Maybe we can discuss this further. So next question, Josh. How do you recommend organization choose between integrated AI solutions or point solutions? Very, very, very good question. I think the problem, I think it comes down to the question of ROI and TCO, because that's almost I've had projects that have gone sideways because we were not clear on what the value proposition was right up front. But if we are basically looking at a low cost and high value return, then you want to use what you have, or you want to optimize what you have. That's where data consolidation becomes this, is such a mess for some of these organizations who never actually take a step to do anything and just leave things as is. What we want to do is have a consolidation strategy, but also modernize using distributed frameworks. I think what Amazon did, what Google did, to consumer data, is the path that we also took to say, hey, these centralized closed systems does not have the ability to scale out and serve folks that are in different geos, different clouds, etc. But if we kind of create a concept of centralized management, but you have nodes or applications that are reporting from these multiple locations or be cloud agnostic, then you're integrating by function, and that is always an economically viable path to where you can bring in applications to run on top of. I think that's very key. That's it's a very key transition that a lot of companies have done, but a lot of companies have not done, and it's becoming more and more of a lift and shift for some of these guys. And hopefully, I answered it again. You can find me on LinkedIn, and if you want to discuss more, I'm happy to kind of ideate with you guys on what is what's still in the what's still aspirational. So I'm right at point. Is there anything I can, Nick? I'll leave you to summarize. If there's anything I can speak to or answer, I'm happy to.
Yeah. Well, actually, we have plenty of time left. We actually have 12 minutes left. So if you either want to take more questions, I have a few more, or you can continue with the other presentation, with your main presentation.
Cool. So let's take a look at. Let me just share my screen back. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to sort of touch on that we kind of, and this is tied into the second question that we have, is I think our journey towards how we kind of created an ability to get more out of the data is something, is my core theme of my talk today. With Cohesity, we didn't go out to build the best backup solution. We wanted to kind of build the bottom part of this. We wanted to sort of build a scalable framework where data becomes an inherent drop point for what we call as Cohesity data. We want to put in some fundamental rules of immutability and things like that, so nobody can tamper with it. This plays a good role when we talk about ransomware. How do we recover from ransomware frameworks? But ultimately, we were able to sort of bring in different applications on top. Once you kind of build an optimized, consolidated framework, which is built on distributed principles, just like how Google did, then it becomes a much more easier aspect. When I say bring compute to where data is, we could easily build a data protection software on top that could solve these four challenges for our customers. And then around 2020, when ransomware started to become a bigger thing, then we needed to bring security closer to where data is managed and protected. And by just building the applications and the right role-based controls for that, we were solving problems like threat scanning, classification, and integrating with your upfront security frameworks. We could bring areas of data mobility as well, the ability for us to do DR orchestration and auto tiering. So all of these seem like very legacy use cases, but we actually modernized this, and we made this a centralized experience in a distributed world. Which is why, pointing to the question that we spoke about with role-based controls, we had a very good start to look at some interesting ways where if we bring in AI, then we have a much better handle on how data can be segmented, swim laned, fenced based on the right persona, the right organization, and then we can present that in any format and way that is possible. So we're sort of looking at a world where, yeah, of course, we've built an AI application on top, but as the as the agent framework becomes more and more popular, we are already our framework allows us to influence a maybe a legal swim lane where you may have a legal process that does deep level classification, and if Cohesity can take care of bringing the right files based on what the person is investigating, then the agent can actually work in a workflow where the legal agent can do what it needs to with regards to custodial and whatever different functions that they need to do. So we're looking at a world where solve the data problem. We can actually bring in different applications that are solving different swim lanes of use cases, and that's a much more optimized way of deploying AI as we sort of go into 2025 and 2026. And I'd argue that this is the type of architecture conversation that usually gets the CIO and CDO type folks interested, because we're basically telling them, do not reinvent the wheel, just optimize it, and then bring in your AI thought process or your AI application, so that every knowledge worker can seamlessly connect, but is always gate kept when it comes to security. So I think that's about what I had to share, Nick. I'm happy to take any live questions that are there, but I think
Great.
we're good. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And we do have a few other questions that I think weren't asked yet. So here's one. What system requirements does Gaia have from a cohesity perspective?
Yeah, it's super simple. So we've already built what we call the distributed file system that holds all of the data, the backups. And in terms of the added component, we leverage the cloud services that is available out of any cloud. So if the enterprise wants to deploy in Azure, then we make use of like a Milvus vector database that's available. We tenant it within our framework, which is basically a click button, and we also use the LLM of choice. I think as we sort of evolve into 2025, 2026, you'll start to see financials, healthcare, and all these different verticals have their own artificial brain of information that's relevant only to that, without having it get noised with other verticals. So we've kind of kept it modular. So the customer can bring in their own large language model. They can bring in we'll basically Lego set that in a couple of clicks, and the value is available to them.
Great. Here's another question. What object types does Cohesity Gaia support?
Mhm. Yeah, so it's primarily any data that we back up. Today we see a lot of consumers look at Microsoft 365, and in combination with on-premise NAS or cloud NAS. I think those are the areas where data gets hoarded a lot, where compliance teams are like wondering, hey, like I'm paying so much money for folks that are just dropping files there. I mean, I do that, so it's natural that your and clouds can be expensive. So the M3 Microsoft 365 is big, NAS is big. Any sort of file shares where data gets stacked, those are big as well. So those are our current applications that we're looking at. But in essence, the beauty about what we're doing is we don't really care about what data type you are, since we can protect it, we can present it back in any type of format. Usually, almost every application can work with the data framework that we have.
Excellent. Here's another one. What access control measures are implemented to ensure that only authorized personnel can use the RAG system for data retrieval?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, like we try to keep it true to the source, right? That's the fundamental philosophy over which we're kind of building that role-based control. But what we do is there is a sub-step in before this person starts to converse with the data, is what we call as a data set creation. And data set creation means that there is an authorized IT lead that basically gets a request from legal that says, hey, I want access to the last 20 salespeople's emails. And the IT person has the ability to basically drag drop the files of relevance, or the historical snapshots of relevance, and assign it to that particular user. And assuming that there is a rule check along the way, then we provide that as a legal data set for Jan 16th for that particular user. So we have the ability to basically create you create basic take a pie out of the entire cake, make sure that is available, that is the data that the legal persona wants to see, and then provide it to that persona so that he can derive value from it. In addition to that, we have some gate checks in terms of integrations with IDP like Okta, as well as the ability to kind of look at NTFS file permissions, etc., to make sure that, again, a condition where a CEO's file is basically mistakenly made available to somebody else due to a user error is prevented. But that is an evolving problem statement, and we have to keep getting better at it as we get more and more of these AI agents that are going to come into the enterprise.
Great. And I think we can fit in one more question. How does the RAG system ensure the integrity and accuracy of the data it retrieves and subsequently generates?
Yeah. So how RAG works is it's a combination of RAG and LLM. Where you're going to have hallucination is where you have many different contexts in a single pool. And one of the sub processes that we do before a person speaks with the system is that if somebody is researching about a particular topic, let's say I'm looking at only I'm interested in Oracle databases, and I want to understand how Cohesity protects Oracle databases, which we do. So my rack system needs to have all, and maybe I have 50,000 documents, which is 30,000 Oracle and 20,000 Microsoft 365. The best case of increasing accuracy is if you get those 20,000 documents that are only Oracle, have it kind of create this vectorized data set as if it's its own universe, and then have the user interact with the system. That way, the artificial human in whichever AI application that you're using is always lives in a domain of all Oracle documentation, and there is no noise coming in from something else. And that's typically why we see ChatGPT and some of these other applications have the idea of hallucination. I mean, they're useful as hell, but when in enterprise you want to be very your aperture needs to be just focused on the use case. So the RAG system allows it to just be the data set allows it to just be in the universe of that particular topic, which also means that you're reducing your degree of hallucination. Hallucination is always going to be there with generative AI, but you're reducing the hallucination. You're increasing accuracy in the same way.
Great. Well, thank you again, Bharath, for such an incredible thought leadership. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And for those of you who earned points throughout today's event, an Argyle team member will be following up with the winners in the next couple of weeks. This officially concludes the Argyle AI Decision Makers Summit, Shaping the Future of Business. Thank you again for joining us today and engaging in our content. We look forward to seeing you at our next Argyle Digital Information Technology event soon, which will be our CIO Leadership Forum, Transformative Power of AI, on February 11th, 2025. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.